New York City glowed beneath a blanket of midnight blue, its towers sparkling like a skyline of fallen stars. Inside a sleek Manhattan penthouse perched above the restless streets, Keanu Reeves enjoyed one of the rarest things in his life: silence. It was 10 p.m. The soft hum of the city faded behind, double-pane glass as he sat, comfortably on his leather sofa, a warm cup of herbal tea in one hand and a new movie script in the other. The lamps created a calm, golden glow that turned the room into a peaceful bubble high above the world. After months of traveling, interviews, and stunt rehearsals, this was the kind of quiet Keanu valued the most, the kind that let him breathe, think, and simply exist without cameras. He turned a page, nodding as he read. The script was promising. A story about redemption, courage, the kind of role he could dive into with his whole heart. As he reached for his tea, he smiled to himself. Maybe this will be my next project. He stood, stretching his shoulders, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. From the 40th floor, New York looked like a moving galaxy. Cars flowed like streams of red and white light far below, and the horizon shimmered with the heartbeat of the city that never slept. Keanu placed a hand on the cold glass. "How strange," he whispered. "How alive this city feels even in the quiet." Then but a faint sound, a thump. Too heavy to be a neighbor's door, too sharp to be the elevator. He froze, his head tilted slightly, listening. Years of martial arts training sharpened his senses instantly. The script slid from his fingers, landing softly on the table. Another thump, louder, more violent, rattled the door of his penthouse. The peace in the room shattered like thin ice. Keanu's heartbeat picked up, steady but alert. He walked slowly toward the hallway, his bare feet silent on the polished wood floor. A strange tension filled the air, something cold, metallic, an energy he couldn't explain. Then came a third pounding, this one strong enough to shake the entire entryway. Dust fell from the top of the door frame. A picture frame on the wall trembled. Keanu's breath hitched. That wasn't knocking, that was an attack. He approached the door carefully, placing his ear against it. Voices rumbled outside, not neighbors, not security, but something harsher, more official, more dangerous. He could hear radios crackling, boots shifting, and at least a dozen people whispering commands. His eyes narrowed. What the hell is going on? Suddenly, a blinding white light swept across the living room windows, the unmistakable glare of a helicopter spotlight. Keanu stepped back, chest tightening, adrenaline flooding through him. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Something massive was happening, and his peaceful night was about to turn into the most terrifying moment of his life. The pounding on the door grew louder, more urgent, more violent, until it echoed through the entire penthouse like thunder. Trapped inside the walls, it wasn't the sound of someone asking for attention. This was the sound of a battering ram testing the strength of his home. Keanu's muscles tightened. His breathing slowed, controlled. Years of action films, real stunt training, combat practice. His body reacted before his mind could even catch up. But this wasn't a movie. There were no cameras, no director yelling cut. This was real, too real. The hallway felt suddenly smaller, darker, as if the lights were dimming under the weight of what was happening. Keanu stepped back, moving away from the door instinctively. His shadow stretched across the wall, flickering as a second helicopter beam swept across the windows. He whispered to himself, "This isn't right." Then, bang! The door shook again, harder than before. Keanu's heart hammered in his chest. He looked around quickly, thinking. He wasn't hiding. He had nothing to hide. But the aggression outside felt like war. Whoever was out there wasn't coming for a conversation. They were coming for a takedown. He reached for his phone on the counter, but before his fingertips touched it, bang, 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 3 deafening strikes hit the door. The frame cracked. Wood splintered. The lock groaned under pressure. Dust drifted from the ceiling like slow-motion snow. Keanu's eyes widened. "Who is it?" he shouted, stepping back. A booming voice answered, warped by the megaphone and the tension in the air. "Federal authority! Keanu Reeves, open the door immediately!" Keanu froze. Federal... what? Why? What possible reason? He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. I don't understand. What's the issue?" he called out, trying to stay calm. No one replied. Instead, the hallway filled with mechanical clicks, dozens of them. It took him a second to recognize the sound. Rifles being raised, safety switches turning off. Weapons ready to fire! He took a step back, instinctively lifting his hands even though no one could see him yet. Then the voice came again, sharper this time, like a blade slicing through the air. Stand away from the door! Hands visible! Final warning! Keanu's pulse roared in his ears. He could feel the pressure building in the air, the electric tension just moments before something catastrophic. And then, a single chilling command breach. Everything happened at once. The explosive charge blew the lock apart in a burst of splinters and metal. The door flew inward, slamming against the wall so hard it nearly broke off its hinges. Smoke and dust filled the hallway, shadows rushed inside, heavily armed FIA officers. Helmets, shields, tactical gear shining under the bright beams of their flashlights. Their boots stomped across the marble floor like an invading. Army get on the ground, Keanu Reeves. Hands up, do not move. The peaceful penthouse transformed into a battlefield. The first wave of officers moved like a storm, boots clanging against the polished wood floors of Keanu's penthouse. Every step, every shift of their bodies radiated precision and control. A machine perfected for confrontation. He froze in the center of the room, trying to process what was happening. The calm evening he had, cherished only moments ago, was gone, swept away by a force that seemed unstoppable. Keanu's eyes darted around, scanning the room. The soft glow of the lamps now seemed insignificant against the harsh white beams of flashlights and the red and blue reflections from police car lights outside. Through the shattered glass of the door, he could see dozens more officers flooding the hallway, swarming from stairwells and elevators, their presence overwhelming. It was no longer just the local police. The American International FIA had arrived in full force. He had heard of them in news stories and films, elite, highly trained and merciless. And now they were inside his home. Hands where we can see them! Move slowly, one officer barked, voice amplified by a megaphone. Another officer held a taser at the ready, shadowed by two colleagues with rifles trained on Keanu's every movement. Keanu's mind raced. Why? What have I done? He racked his memory frantically, trying to remember if any of his actions, public appearances, interviews, films, travels, could have triggered this nightmare. Nothing made sense. The room filled with the mechanical hum of radios, the crackling voices of officers communicating through earpieces, the low rumble of tactical vehicles idling outside. Helicopters circled overhead, spotlights slicing through the night sky, casting harsh shadows across Keanu's face. The city below continued its indifferent rhythm, unaware that one of its most famous sons was under siege inside his own home. One officer, clearly a senior agent, stepped forward. He was imposing, mid-40s, sharp eyes, face unreadable beneath the tactical helmet. His voice carried an authority that left no room for argument. Keanu Reeves, you are under arrest for your involvement in a federal investigation. Resist and there will be consequences. Keanu shook his head in disbelief. This has to be a mistake. I've done nothing wrong, he said, voice trembling but firm. The senior agent didn't flinch. No mistakes. You will come with us. Now, before Keanu could react, two officers approached from either side. One grabbed his left arm, the other his right. The sheer strength and coordination of the officers left him little choice but to comply. His protests were drowned out by the sound of boots pounding, radios chattering, and the low mechanical growl of armored vehicles. Outside, Keanu's heart pounded violently. He was being herded toward the shattered doorway, toward a convoy that would take him far from the safety of his home. The room, once a sanctuary filled with soft light and quiet, now felt like a trap, suffocating and claustrophobic. Keanu's heart slammed against his ribs as the officers tightened their circle. The air inside his penthouse had shifted, now heavy with tension and fear, electrified like the calm before a storm. His mind raced, but before he could react further, a deafening bang shattered the room's fragile silence. The front door, the solid oak he had installed for safety, exploded inward in a splintering burst of wood and metal. Shards flew across the floor, bouncing off walls and the polished marble, some grazing the edge of the sofa where he had been sitting only moments ago. Dust and smoke clouded the room, swirling around the stark beams of police flashlights that now danced across every surface. The force of the blast pushed Keanu back a step. He raised his hands instinctively, his eyes wide, chest heaving, adrenaline flooding every fiber of his being. He could feel the vibrations reverberate through the floor beneath him, the air thick with the smell of burning wood and gun oil. From the shattered doorway, heavily armed FIA officers poured in like a relentless wave. Their shields clicked into place, rifles raised, and helmets gleamed under the bright city lights flooding through the open entryway. It was an orchestrated assault, precise and terrifying, a sight no human being should witness in their own home. "Down on the floor!" a commanding voice thundered. Keanu's instincts screamed at him to move, to resist, but he knew he was outnumbered. Slowly, he lowered himself to the polished wood, knees bending, palms raised. His breathing came in rapid, controlled bursts. The officer in front of him loomed, rifle trained directly on his chest, eyes locked onto him like a predator analyzing its prey. The room erupted in chaos around him. Radios crackled with urgent commands, boots slammed against the floor, and a helicopter's spotlight from outside cast shifting shadows across walls and furniture. Shards of splintered wood littered the floor like a battlefield after a skirmish, glittering under the harsh, strobe-like lights. Keanu's eyes flicked to the chaos beyond the shattered doorway. More agents streamed in from the stairwell, armored vehicles idling outside the penthouse, their lights flashing an almost hypnotic red and blue. It felt surreal, a scene from one of his own movies, but darker, colder, and impossible to escape. An officer moved forward and grabbed Keanu's arm, yanking him upright. "Hands behind your back! Now!" Keanu's mind raced, searching for any escape, any opening, any possibility, but there was none. The penthouse that had been his sanctuary, his private haven, was gone. All that remained was a battlefield, and he was at its center, despite the terror. A spark of determination ignited in him. He wasn't just a victim. He had survived impossible stunts, life-threatening challenges, and death-defying moments on film and in life. Whatever this assault was, he would endure it. He would survive it. The officers closed in, cuffing his wrists. The moment the cold metal bit into his wrists, reality hit Keanu like a freight train. The cuffs were tight, unforgiving, a stark contrast to the softness of the penthouse he had called home just minutes before. He was no longer the actor, no longer a man in control of a scene. He was just trapped. Keanu lowered himself to the floor as instructed, the polished wood cool against his knees, his fingers twitching behind his back. Every movement reminded him that his freedom, his life as he knew it, had been stripped away in a heartbeat. The room, once warm with lamplight and comfort, now felt like a cage, harsh beams of red and blue light cutting through, the smoke and dust like a spotlight on his own helplessness. He looked up, meeting the cold, unreadable eyes of the officer directly in front of him. Helmet, shield, rifle, an impenetrable wall of authority. Keanu's throat tightened as he swallowed hard. Trying to speak, but only a soft, choked whisper emerged. This isn't real. It can't be." The officer ignored him, moving to secure the perimeter. Around him, the penthouse had transformed into a battlefield. Furniture lay overturned from the earlier explosion. Shards of wood glittered on the floor, and the sound of radios crackling mixed with the low hum of helicopters hovering outside. Outside, flashing lights reflected across shattered glass, illuminating Keanu's face in a dramatic dance of color and shadow. Keanu's mind raced. Why me? What could possibly justify this? He had never been involved in anything illegal, never associated with crime. And yet here he was, surrounded, restrained, and powerless. The sheer weight of the situation threatened to crush him. An officer knelt beside him, inspecting the cuffs to ensure they were secure. Keanu flinched at the touch, the cold metal pressing into his wrists, a painful reminder of the stark reality. Another agent barked orders to the rest of the team, her voice sharp, commanding, leaving no room for argument. Every word, every movement, every flash of light reinforced one terrifying truth: he was at their mercy. Even in this chaos, Keanu's mind refused to succumb. Years of discipline, years of training in martial arts and stunt work, gave him a clarity few would understand. He studied the room, noting every shadow, every possible angle, every way the officers moved. He wasn't going to panic. Not yet, not if he could help it. But for now, he was forced to endure. He felt the cold seep into his bones, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He could hear the faint shuffle of boots, the low murmur of radios, the heavy breathing of officers maintaining control. And beneath it all, the distant roar of the city continued its indifferent rhythm, unaware of the drama unfolding high above. Keanu lowered his head, pressing it against the floor, trying to calm his racing heart. He allowed himself a moment to breathe, to gather his thoughts. As Keanu Reeves was forced to his feet, guided by the cold grip of federal officers, the first hint of the outside world's reaction hit him. Through the shattered windows of his penthouse, he could see a sea of flashing lights, helicopters hovering above, and cameras pointing directly at him. The city that had always been his sanctuary now felt like a stage, and he was the unwilling actor in a drama he hadn't scripted. "Step outside slowly," a commanding voice barked. Keanu obeyed, his heart hammering, his wrists tight in handcuffs. Every step toward the open doorway felt like walking across a tightrope over a pit of chaos. Outside, the moment he emerged, a barrage of light, sound, and movement engulfed him. News vans, reporters, and camera crews had gathered, their equipment ready to capture every second. The flashing lights of cameras clashed with the red and blue of police sirens, creating a disorienting kaleidoscope of color that reflected off the wet pavement below. Helicopter spotlights painted stark shadows across Keanu's face, highlighting every line of shock, fear, and determination. The reporters shouted over one another, their voices blending into a chaotic roar. "Keanu Reeves, can you explain the allegations? Mr. Reeves, are you guilty? Is this a misunderstanding?" Keanu's voice was drowned out by the chaos. Even as he tried to speak, the words were lost in the storm of questions. He felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly powerless. Every glance from the cameras felt like it was capturing not just his image, but the full weight of an injustice unfolding in real time. Officers guided him toward a black armored van idling under the glow of the streetlights. He noticed the intensity in their movements, the precision of every step, the strict coordination that left no room for error. They were professionals, elite, unyielding. And yet, every second outside was a reminder of the humiliation and danger he now faced. The helicopters above hovered low, their rotors chopping the night air into a deafening rhythm. The spotlight caught the edge of his hair, the curve of his jaw, and the intensity of his eyes. Keanu Reeves, the global star, now at the center of a federal storm broadcast live to the world. Passers-by stopped on the sidewalks, staring in disbelief. Phones were raised, capturing videos, posting live updates. Social media would explode within minutes. By the time the armored convoy began to move, every corner of the city, and eventually the world, would know about this arrest. Keanu's mind raced. The sheer scale of the media attention was overwhelming. But beneath the fear and shock, a plan began to form. He knew that the public eye could be a double-edged sword, dangerous, but also a potential shield. Every photo, every headline, every live broadcast was a reminder that he was not alone. People would question the legitimacy of this assault. The truth would find a way to surface, if he survived long enough to tell it. The black armored van rumbled through the streets of New York, a moving fortress slicing through the night. Keanu Reeves sat rigidly inside, hands cuffed, muscles tense, eyes scanning every shadow, every movement outside the reinforced windows. The silence in the van was thick, punctuated only by the low hum of the engine and the occasional shuffle of boots from the officers surrounding him. The city blurred past in streaks of red and blue light as sirens roared behind them. Helicopters hovered above, their powerful spotlights sweeping across the streets, casting long, dramatic shadows inside the vehicle. Every moment felt surreal, like a scene out of one of Keanu's own action films. But there were no stunts here. No rehearsed choreography, only the cold reality of being under siege. Keanu's mind raced. Why are they doing this? What possible reason could there be for this assault? Every rational explanation faltered under the weight of disbelief. He had lived his life with integrity, avoiding scandal, crime, and controversy. And yet here he was, surrounded by elite officers, trapped in a fortress on wheels, being whisked toward a place whose name alone carried fear, maximum security. The officers inside the van communicated in terse, clipped tones, their voices measured, almost clinical. They didn't glance at him, didn't speak unless necessary. Their professionalism only intensified the cold, isolating atmosphere. The van's reinforced windows reflected streaks of light from the streets, making the interior feel like a cage, a moving nightmare. Every few blocks, the convoy tightened. Black SUVs and police motorcycles flanking the van. The coordination was meticulous, designed to leave no room for escape. Keanu realized the full scale of what he was up against. This wasn't a simple arrest. It was a full-scale, calculated operation. He closed his eyes briefly, trying to calm the rapid beating of his heart. Adrenaline surged through him, reminding him of every dangerous situation he had faced in life and on screen. He had survived impossible stunts, daring escapes, and death-defying scenarios. This is just another challenge, he told himself, and I will survive it. The streets grew darker as they left Manhattan, skyscrapers replaced by industrial buildings and empty highways. The van moved with precision, the engines vibrating under Keanu's feet, the air inside thick with tension. He tried to catch glimpses of the city outside through the tinted windows, but the night refused to reveal more than fleeting shadows. Hours seemed to compress into minutes. The rhythmic thrum of the van became almost hypnotic, a drumbeat accompanying the rising fear and anticipation inside him. Every stoplight, every turn, every patrol officer on the streets became part of a carefully orchestrated plan that Keanu was powerless to resist. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the convoy approached a massive, imposing structure. The van doors clanged open, and Keanu Reeves was shoved forward, escorted by officers whose faces remained unreadable beneath their helmets. The cold air of the prison corridor hit him like a physical blow, slicing through the warmth of the van and sending shivers down his spine. Every step echoed on the concrete floor, a harsh, relentless reminder of how far from home he had come. The walls of the maximum security prison loomed over him, gray and unforgiving. Steel bars lined the corridors, punctuated by the harsh glare of fluorescent lights that buzzed incessantly. Every corner, every shadow seemed alive, as if the building itself was aware of the new occupant it had just received. Keanu's wrists throbbed from the cuffs, each movement of his hands reminding him of his helplessness. He tried to speak, to ask a question, to plead for reason, but no one looked at him. No one answered. He was a number now, not a person, a spectacle now, not a star. The guards pushed him into a narrow corridor that led to the dreaded wing of the prison. Doors clanged behind them, heavy and final, each lock engaging with a metallic snap. Keanu's heart raced, every beat echoing in the small space between the walls. He felt like prey being funneled into a cage designed to break even the strongest spirit. Finally, they arrived at the cell. The door opened with a hiss, revealing a tiny, dimly lit room barely large enough for a cot and a steel toilet. The walls were cold concrete, the floor rough and unforgiving. There was no window, no escape, no comfort, just four walls, a single harsh light, and the suffocating presence of isolation. Keanu stepped inside, forced forward by a guard whose grip was firm and unyielding. The door slammed behind him with a deafening thud, the lock clicking into place. The sound echoed like a verdict. He was alone. Completely alone! He sank onto the narrow cot, the steel frame biting into his back. His wrists were still sore from the cuffs, his mind racing to process the reality of his situation. 7 years, the thought echoed in his mind. They claimed he was connected to a case, a death, something unimaginable. And now, without explanation, without trial, he was trapped here, facing the unknown consequences. Keanu leaned back, staring at the ceiling, counting the fluorescent lines of light as if each one could hold a secret, a way out. His breathing slowed, controlled as he forced himself to think. Panic was useless. Fear would only weaken him, and weakness had no place in this cell. Outside, the sounds of the prison were a constant reminder of his captivity. Distant shouts, the clang of metal doors, footsteps echoing in the corridors, all blending into a symphony of confinement. But beneath it all, Keanu felt the spark that had carried him through every challenge of his life. Determination. He would endure. He would survive. And he would find a way to uncover the truth. The walls were cold. The cell was small. The first night in the death cell passed in a blur of darkness and fear. Keanu Reeves lay on the narrow steel cot, staring at the concrete ceiling, listening to the distant clanging of doors, the echo of heavy boots, and the occasional shouted command. Each sound reminded him that he was trapped, alone, and at the mercy of a system that seemed determined to destroy him. Yet even in the oppressive gloom, his mind refused to succumb to despair. He needed answers. He needed a way out. By midday, a sliver of hope arrived in the form of a brief visit. A man in a dark suit and glasses, who identified himself only as Keanu's legal counsel, entered the cell. His eyes were sharp, his movements precise, but there was urgency in his tone that immediately caught Keanu's attention. "They set you up," the lawyer said quietly, scanning the corridor outside before stepping closer. "It wasn't random. This isn't about justice, it's about power. Someone with influence wants you gone, or silenced. They've manipulated evidence to connect you to that 7-year-old case. They want you trapped here long enough to destroy your reputation and career." Keanu's jaw tightened. His mind raced, replaying events, trying to connect dots that didn't make sense. Who would do this? And why? The lawyer shook his head. "I can't tell you everything here. It's too dangerous. But you need to understand this. You are the target of a high-level conspiracy. The people behind this have resources that reach far beyond this prison. They've orchestrated the entire arrest, the media frenzy, the transport. Every detail was calculated to make you powerless." Keanu's fists clenched. The cell, once suffocating, now felt like the stage for a battle of wits and courage. Fear was still present, but determination began to replace it. He had faced countless stunts, life-threatening situations, and impossible odds in his films and in real life. This was no different. Survival, strategy, and patience were his weapons now. The lawyer handed him a small, discreet notebook. Notes, schedules, anything you can use. You'll need to think clearly, plan carefully. This isn't just about surviving the prison, it's about uncovering the truth and exposing those responsible. Keanu's eyes softened, gratitude mixed with resolve. He opened the notebook and began scanning the information, memorizing contacts, timelines, and inconsistencies in the supposed case against him. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, but he was no stranger to assembling chaos into order. The lawyer's presence faded, leaving Keanu alone once more, but this time, solitude didn't feel like defeat. It felt like preparation. Every sound outside, the footfalls, the locks, the distant arguments, became part of his awareness. Every shadow, every creak, every movement in the prison held potential insight. Keanu leaned back against the cold wall, letting the weight of his situation settle in. This was more than a battle for freedom. It was a battle for truth. Keanu Reeves sat on the narrow steel cot, the notebook from his lawyer resting on his lap. His wrists still ached from the cuffs, his body sore from the long night of forced transport and confinement. Yet beneath the physical discomfort, a fire burned, a fire that refused to be extinguished. This was more than survival. This was justice. This was reclaiming his life. He studied the notes carefully, tracing timelines, inconsistencies, and the faint threads of a conspiracy that had ensnared him. Every name, every document, every piece of evidence was a puzzle he needed to solve. The system had labeled him guilty, but Keanu refused to accept it. He knew that truth and courage were stronger than fear and deception. Hours passed as he mentally rehearsed his next steps. He would need allies, lawyers who were fearless, contacts who could penetrate the layers of corruption, and above all, patience. The media frenzy, the FIA operation, and the prison authorities had assumed he would panic, break, or comply blindly. But Keanu had never been the type to surrender. He had survived stunts, car chases, life-threatening scenarios on film, and now he would survive the most personal, real-life battle of all. When the cell door clanged open again, he was ready. The guard handed him a small tray of food, their expression unreadable. Keanu accepted it, nodding slightly. Every interaction was a test, a calculation. Every glance, every word, every pause could provide insight. He had learned long ago that observation was a weapon as sharp as any sword. As he ate, he visualized the steps he needed to take, uncover the true criminal, expose the false evidence, and ensure that the world understood the truth. He imagined the headlines, not of his arrest, not of his humiliation, but of his triumph. Keanu Reeves exposes conspiracy. Justice restored. These thoughts fueled his determination, turning fear into focus. Even in the darkness of the death cell, hope became a strategy. He practiced scenarios in his mind, anticipating every obstacle, every betrayal, every manipulation. The enemy was powerful, but so was he. Every physical skill, every mental discipline, every ounce of resilience he had honed over decades was now at his disposal. Hours turned into days. The guards came and went. The prison world continued its harsh rhythms. But Keanu remained a calm storm within the chaos. The cell that had once seemed like a cage now became his sanctuary for planning, reflection, and preparation. Every sound outside, every shuffle of footsteps, every metallic clang became a signal, a potential clue, a rhythm to which he adapted then. As night fell once more, Keanu closed his eyes for a brief moment and let a single thought crystallize in his mind. He would not be broken. He would not be silenced. He would prove his innocence, expose the conspiracy, and reclaim his life. The world would watch, and the truth would prevail. Keanu Reeves had been handcuffed, confined, and framed.